I'm pleased to introduce our resident cosmetic expert, Jacqueline Belomo, Senior Director of Cosmetic Science and Regulatory Affairs, who will share key MOCRA provisions that you must follow and how they impact your business operations. A seasoned, respected key figure in the cosmetic industry, Jacqueline will provide you through challenges with product listings, navigating Cosmetics Direct, new adverse event requirements, amongst other things. Throughout this webinar, feel free to write any questions in the Q&A box as we've saved time at the end to answer them. Without any further ado, Jacqueline, take it away.
Thank you so much, Alexis, and welcome everyone. I am very excited to talk to you today about how to become MOCRA compliant quickly. For today's discussion, we're going to do a quick overview of MOCRA and the enforcement implications. We're also going to be talking about the challenges with facility registration and product listing requirements. As we all know, that July 1st date is quickly approaching. And then what we've been really seeing in industry is the struggle with adverse event requirements since they are new to cosmetics. So we're really going to go in depth about a proper adverse event quality management system, your intake system, things to look out for, things to consider company-wise of how you can properly prepare, record keep, and even if you do have to report, the best ways to do so. And again, we're going to walk through, how Registrar can help you become compliant as well and support you through these new MOCRA requirements with FDA. And as Alexis mentioned, any questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A box and we will answer them at the end. So quick overview for Registrars. For those that do not know, we are the world's largest FDA compliance company. We are the global experts in MOCRA. I'm sure many of you have seen us at every event, speaking and supporting. We serve over 1,000 cosmetic companies for MOCRA compliance, and we have completed over 26,000 product listings in the past 3 months. Huge number, lots of listings, and we are the only company that meets the ISO 27001 standard for data security and to protect trade secrets, and of course, all of your information. So we're going to start with the obvious. There is only 14 business days to FDA enforcement. It seemed like it was just the end of December and portals opened and FDA, gave us that extra 6 months. Well, those 6 months are coming to an end, and in 14 days, that July 1st will start FDA's enforcement for facility registration and product listings. And we are not ready as an industry. There are a lot of companies that are running behind getting their listings done. There is still confusion around how to properly list product SKUs. And then, of course, more importantly, most companies have not implemented the adverse event reporting system. And it's very important to understand what these MOCRA compliance requirements have to do, not only with the FDA compliance, but also retailers that you work with and online platforms that you work with that are requiring this type of evidence that you've listed your products and that you are compliant with FDA MOCRA listing requirements, and that you have the proper adverse event contact information as well for adverse events. So all of this is really encompassing FDA, retailers, marketplaces to make sure that compliance is happening. Before, when this was a voluntary program, it was easy to follow a lot of FDA regulations around labeling, around proper GMPs. Now, with all of these MOCRA regulations, it's important to add these into your product development timelines, into your procedures, and understanding exactly what has to be done. So MOCRA's journey is only just beginning. We are 6 months into the year, and we see a lot of the regulations that are already being enforced, such as those adverse events, the safety substantiation, some labeling, and then, of course, the facility registration and product listings that should be happening now due to that July 1st date. But we see, as we keep moving along through the other regulations, FDA released their first comment about the talc containing cosmetics. Very exciting as we'll see some fragrance allergen proposed rulemaking at the end of the month. I think we have all been waiting for that, patiently, to see how FDA will handle these allergen disclosures on label and thresholds. And then, of course, GMP. In a short 6 months, we will see the first proposed rulemaking for GMPs. And I think everyone is curious the route that FDA will take for these GMPs and quality standards. So there's still, a lot more MOCRA to be had, and probably the most significant amount of implications to comply with are still coming down the pipeline. Very important to always level set where the responsibility lies for MOCRA, and it really depends on your role in industry. So for instance, a facility, you are charged with registration, GMPs, inspection, record access, and of course, a US agent for non-US facilities. Responsible person takes the chunk of MOCRA requirements with product listing, adverse event record keeping, serious adverse event reporting, safety substantiations, record access, recalls, labeling updates, and of course that fragrance allergen disclosures. But as an industry, we are super fluid. We work together. It's no man by themselves standing alone. So ingredient suppliers will have a impact as well on some of these requirements, and whether it be providing, safety substantiation testing or analysis on individual ingredients, fragrance allergen disclosures, and even animal testing declarations as well. As the testing in asbestos for talc method gets standardized, of course, that will also come into play, and any toxicological data on PFASs. The PFASs will become very important in the coming year, especially with these state regulations. Also taking their stance on PFASs, it's very important for any ingredient suppliers to have statements about PFASs, about their ingredients, and eventually in packaging as well, as we have already seen. So the July 1st enforcement deadline, I think this is on everyone's mind. I know I was just at the PCPC regulatory conference last week, which was also amazing. And this was just topic of conversation of how many people are prepared, how many people have been doing their due diligence, and then also the people that keep saying we have a month left. So this is just to understand exactly the existing facilities and existing products that must have registered or listed in the portal no later than that July 1st date. New facilities will have 60 days after first manufacturing or processing in the US to register, but renewal will happen every 2 years with any update within 60 days. For product listings, any new products will have 120 days after first marketing the product in the US to list their product, with renewal every year. And this will include updates and delisting and adding new factories, anything of that nature. So very important to understand your existing facilities, existing products, that July 1st date, and then moving forward, right? Because it does not stop at that July 1st date. You're not done. You're going to have to keep moving along with all of your upcoming resets for summer, your upcoming holiday kits. All of these are going to have to be listed as well. So July 1st is the big push, but there is much, much more that is going to happen after that to keep compliant. Understanding FDA's expanded authority and regulatory power over the cosmetic industry is very, very important to understand, and why it's important to be compliant with all these new MOCRA regulations. FDA has long had authority in terms of inspecting facilities, but it's important, and detaining products for anything that is misbranded or adulterated. But it's important to understand, how these authorities, their authority expands with these new MOCRA regulations. So again, these inspections of facilities can request the access to records relating to a cosmetic product, especially if the product has a threat of being a public health concern, or a product products manufactured at that facility have a concern to cause serious adverse events or death. FDA can suspend that facility too if there's a reasonable probability that causing a serious adverse event, consequence, or public health concern as well. Mandatory recall, I'm sure everyone has heard about this, and it's important to understand FDA's authority over recall. And FDA is allowed to have a mandatory recall if they determine that a cosmetic product has been adulterated or misbranded, or the use or exposure of that cosmetic product will cause a serious adverse health consequence or death. So very, very important to understand FDA's ability there. FDA does give the responsible person the ability to do a voluntary recall and cease distribution. It just allows FDA authority to step in if that is not done by the responsible person. Warning letters, of course, they have long been around. We've seen them more often than not from FDA, but FDA can issue warning letters to those responsible persons and manufacturers that violate FDA regulations around MOCRA requirements, specifically around registrations and product listings that are considered a prohibited act under MOCRA. So FDA is allowed to issue those warning letters to those who do not comply with facility registration and product listings. The biggest part about these warning letters is that they are public, and they do make their way to the public. So it's very important to understand that prohibited act of not complying with registrations and listings could lead you down the path of receiving this warning letter. And then again, import detentions, the FDA has the right to detain and import a product if during an import FDA finds the product to violate a part of the FD&C Act as well. Import alerts, very important to understand that this can be placed on a country, a company, and or products to alert if there is a continuing issue, with certain products, with a country importing certain cosmetics. And this is to prevent potentially products coming into the US that would be adulterated or misbranded as well. So it does place the responsibility back on the importer in this case. So inspection and record access. The record access authority is really important to understand. Proper GMPs is, you always keep proper records, and it's important to understand the records that have to be kept. With this new adverse event requirement with MOCRA, it's important to understand that these records can be accessed by FDA as well. And again, this is the authority that if FDA believes the cosmetic product or ingredients is likely to be adulterated, and that the use or exposure of the product presents a threat or serious adverse health consequence. And hopefully you can hear the repetition and the importance of saying that when there is a adverse event or a public health concern, this is where FDA is going to step in. So having proper adverse event records, having proper documentation of these adverse events that occur, and even proper reporting to FDA is crucial for the responsible person to maintain, to show that you as a company did your due diligence for these specific events that occurred that are health related from the use of a cosmetic product. Also very important to know, FDA can request the list of ingredients in a product's fragrances or flavors if they have contributed to a serious adverse event. So again, hand in hand, these fragrance allergen disclosures and these record accesses is going to be a very important piece of having everything organized for your cosmetic products. Record access, you don't want to be handing over all different records that are unorganized. It's important to keep everything organized and have the right information available if requested. And again, FDA does not have authority over financial data, shipment data, pricing data, sales data, the recipe, if you will have it, of the formulation. Their goal here is to really understand the implications of that cosmetics product being adulterated or having something in the formula that could potentially cause a serious adverse event or public health consequence. Recall, I've heard a lot of people have tons of questions about recalls, and we've seen this in other spaces with food and drugs and medical devices, and now with cosmetics, right? And the FDA has to determine, if there's a reasonable probability that a cosmetic product is adulterated or misbranded, and that exposure would cause that serious adverse health consequence or death. And the responsible person is the one that has to voluntarily cease, and then refusal to do so kind of ignites will ignite that mandatory recall. And that's where it's very important to understand your role in products hitting the market and being exposed in the market. Currently, there are 3 classes of recalls that are, FDA has established, class 1, class 2, and class 3. And as you can see, the different classes kind of show the high level of concern that the recall would have on the public health concern. So class 1, you have the probability that the use or exposure of a product will result in a serious adverse event, consequence, or death. Class 2 is temporary or medical reversible adverse health consequence, or where the probability of a serious health consequence could occur. And then class 3, the use or exposure, the product is not likely to cause that health consequence in terms of the adverse event. So very, very important to understand. And then also understand too how an adverse product is related to a single use of that product, or a larger scope of where multiple products are affected of that same product, or multiple products are affected from a facility standpoint that can cause a public health concern. So there's a multi-layer understanding here of how these recalls are evaluated, how they're investigated, and again, so crucial and so important to have the proper records in place to properly do so. Another important piece to mention is retailers that are sending out letters and requiring proof of MOCR compliance. As we know, those that sell in large retailers, there are already many requirements that you must submit in order to sell your products in specific retailers. And retailers do not shy away from making sure that you are compliant and being sold on their shelves to be compliant. Large retailers use platforms so that you can submit MSDSs, formula compositions, safety information, and many have annual reviews of your product to make sure that you stay in compliance not only with FDA but also with state regulations. And these involve labeling, heavy metal testing, tox information. So those who sell in retailers understand that they are very committed to being compliant and making sure that the products that they provide on the shelf are compliant with FDA, state, and safety regulations. A lot of retailers have already sent letters, giving the requirements of MOCR and letting everyone know that it's important to have your product listing numbers available. You can provide SPL PDFs, screenshots of your submissions, and of course that adverse event contact information. If you have not already, but very important to confirm with your retailer or your online market space about their policies around MOCR and what type of requirements that you will need to provide to them, because it will be crucial, a part of their compliance programs to be able to stay on their shelves and continue selling in those spaces as well. Next on our discussion, we are going to talk about the challenges of facility registration and product listing requirements. And hopefully everyone on this call has at least signed into Cosmetics Direct or seen screenshots or at least have a login. It's important that if you have not experienced Cosmetic Direct before in other parts of FDA, as such as CDER, is a great example. If this is all new to you, it can be very confusing. It could be very confusing to understand what steps happen first, what has to be done first, and your part in completing your compliance due to your responsibility and your role as a company. First thing that we all learned back in December is that facility registration has to happen first before you can do any product listings. I think a lot of us just ran to the portal, started to try to put in our product listings, and realized that it could not be done unless the facility registered first. And with the final guidance that was issued in December, we learned that an FEI number had to be requested from FDA before you could start your registration. So it added these steps and complexities that we kind of had to grow and learn in the last few months of how to properly do this, so you don't hit stop gaps. You're not waiting around for for certain information, you can understand the process more clearly. So the FEI number is where all of this starts. So as a facility, you need to know if you have an FEI number. FDA has said do not ask for a new FEI number if you already have one associated with that facility. And they have given, a FEI search portal for companies to use to see if there's already an existing FEI number. So we created this little path for you to help you through this process. So if you have an FEI number, yes, you use that FEI number to register your facility. And then that FEI number is used in your product listings. If you are not sure if you have an FEI number, you can confirm with FDA's search portal. If you do, then you follow the path to registering and then being able to list your products. And then if you do not, then you can request the FEI from the email address provided there. It does take about 7 to 10 business days for FDA to respond with an FEI number, just to put in perspective the timing and consideration that needs to happen when you are evaluating your timing before the enforcement deadline as well. But hopefully a lot of you have established your FEI numbers for registration, or if not, we can definitely help you through that process as well. Product listings, I feel, has been the largest struggle, and probably we receive hundreds and hundreds of questions a day about product listings. And again, every cosmetic product that is sold in the United States needs to have a listing. And that listing will require a list of ingredients, including those fragrance and flavors or colors identified by the common or usual name for each cosmetic product. So again, you should be gathering your list of ingredients. You should be determining your cosmetic categories per the appendix that FDA issued. And then you should be identifying where all these cosmetic products are manufactured or processed, right? So each FEI number has to be associated with that cosmetic product. So if you are making cosmetic product in one facility, filling in another, and then conducting testing for batch release at a lab, all three of those FEI numbers need to be listed on your product listing. So very, very important that you understand your supply chain and you collect all these registration numbers for your product listing. There was a lot of confusion when the lab portion came in. So just want to talk briefly what that means is if you are a lab that conducts batch release testing, for example, micro testing for batch release, you will need to register as a part of the processing piece of MOCRA. So that was kind of a new guidance that was issued, and so many are trying to figure out and understand if they are part of that process. And as a responsible person, you should know where your product's filled, where your product's made, and of course, where your product is tested. So Cosmetics Direct, first things first is you need a login. You need to sign in and have a login, and understand that there are mandatory fields that you should have ready and prepared ahead of time before even starting this process. So again, those FEI numbers should all be collected, lists of ingredients should all be collected. It's important to have all the product names, all the product categories. These are all requirements that are mandatory for you to be able to submit through the portal properly. And here's some screenshots in case you haven't seen a little bit of what it looks like. It does describe each section. It does describe exactly what's needed. Anything that is mandatory has that red asterisk, but you are required to complete all the fields for MOCRA or required by FDA. And this again is if you even need to designate as a small business, you can do so in the portal. You can enter the responsible person. You could designate all the product categories. You can save if you don't have all the information just yet. So you can save and come back if you need to. And then of course you can validate your product listing before actually submitting to FDA. So if there's any issues or anything, which we'll talk about later, because there are some validation issues and errors that occur, you could do so here. Very important to note, there is a clone feature that you're able to clone each individual product listing. If you have multiple shades, you can do so with the clone button. But the only way to do a upload of multiple product listings at the same time is through the structured product labeling format, or also known as SPL. but that clone feature is helpful if you are doing it manually. I will let you know this does take some time, and you do need to edit as you clone and move to the next product listing. But again, for right now, if you do not have that SPL technology or software, that is the best route way to do so if you have multiple product listings. Again, very important to understand your type of business. If you are the manufacturer, the packer, or the distributor, understanding your facility standpoint. If they're a small business, the information that you need from them in order to put into the system, because if a facility is a small business, then they don't need an FEI number, but they need other information to put there as well. So there's multiple pieces and moving factors in the product listings part that could really stall you or would cause you to have to pause and go collect more information. So the more information that you have up front, the better off you will be moving through the system fast and having the right information, not to get validation errors, not to have any issues when you're submitting the actual product listing to FDA. Ingredients. So this is a huge question we get, mostly because each ingredient does need to be added individually. And ingredients, again, will have to, that are listed on the label are going to be that common or usual name. But then when you get into the system, the Unicodes, as you can see from the screenshot to the side, don't necessarily match, but you can use the Unicode database. So to look up your ingredients Unicode, if your name on the label doesn't 100% match the Unicode that's listed in this system. You also have to add all the may contain ingredients as well. So these are going to be all your colorants, as discussed previously. There is an ingredient file template that is in the system, but all our trials and everything that we've done realize that the only way the template works 100% correctly is if you have all the Unicodes ahead of time for the ingredients. So that means if you don't have Unicodes, you'll have to go to the Unicode database, look up those Unicodes, add them into the template along with your ingredients. So trying to save some time, trying to save you guys to understand the process of Unicodes into the template, ingredients individually into the template is a way to do this. Still manually, but I guess a little bit faster. I myself have typed in manually a lot of these ingredients. So you have to spell them correctly. You have to make sure that they're listed in the same way as the label. So these are just important tips to kind of move through this process. It can be daunting. There are some cases where there's 50 to 60 ingredients per product, and it could be a lot to enter in manually. And that is where, a lot of the time consuming part will come into play. So just have all of that information organized ahead of time of getting into the portal and dedicate the time in order to do so. So really key here is to understand the time consuming part is this ingredient part. If you have multiple ingredients in a formulation, you don't have Unicode set up, it's important to understand how this piece of it works, especially if you're doing it this manual way. So individual product listings and this word flexible listing, right? So we were long told flexible listings, we're going to be able to enter one listing for anything that was the same formulation and only different in fragrances or colorants. Unfortunately, FDA has not offered any guidance on how to enter flexible listings. There isn't a flexible listing check mark. There is not something to say this contains 50 shades. And there's no way to manage if you have individual shades in the system other than entering each shade for that product individually. So for instance, if you have 50 eyeshadows and you need to manage 50 eyeshadows because you're either adding 10 new eyeshadow colors or taking 10 new or delisting 10 eyeshadows, the only way to manage that correctly within the system is having each individual shade listed separately, which probably is daunting for a highly colored type of company to have to manage in that way. But again, that clone option gives you that copy and paste ability for that listing. So you would just have to go back in and update the colorants for that specific shade and the information in the product name as well. So product name has to be edited, and anything to do with the shade has to be edited if you don't have that may contain piece a part of your shade range. Again, bulk uploads can only be completed through SPL. And more recently, we learned that there is a max number of bulk uploads that you are allowed to submit as well. So anything above, say, 200-300 listings cannot be done quickly through the system. So you'd have to do multiple SPLs in order to get that completed. And this is where this is very important, right? So if you have these bulk uploads or you're manually doing this, the time that you would have to commit in order to make sure that these are listed properly. This, I think, was the most shocking for a lot of us to understand, especially when it comes to having to manage the product listings and managing product listings per SKU, because that is, how we work in this industry is understanding each product SKU, understanding shade lineups. So to have individual listings for these can be a lot to handle and a lot to manage. So it's very important to set this up correctly so you don't run into problems when you need to do updates, delist, or renew your products every year. So 9 practical tips, right, for listing your products on your own. As I mentioned, facility registration has to be completed before, and only 1 registration per FEI. Facility name and address must match exactly to that submitted to FDA. Mandatory fields need to be entered to validate and submit. Product name can contain brand name if the product name is not unique. So very important to understand, if your product name is not unique enough, the system will reject your product listing. So you cannot just have lotion. It will say not unique enough. So our recommendation is to add in a brand name to make it a little bit more unique. No special characters, so no ampersands, no pound signs, nothing of that nature will be accepted. You will get a validation error. And then you must match exactly on registration listings the responsible person and contact information and product categories. So what we have learned is that facilities will do their facility registration, they will put the RP, they'll put the brand, contact information, and product categories for that brand. If the brand goes to do their listing and does not match exactly to that facility, the same information, the product listing will be rejected. So it is very important to have open communication with your manufacturers, exactly how they listed your brand, your RP contact information into the system, as well as those product categories. Otherwise, you will struggle on the product listing side of having those all match and align. Again, multiple product listings can only be completed through the SPL file, and not all ingredient names have Unicodes. So again, if you don't have those Unicodes, you can't use the FDA's template. It does take some time to look up those Unicodes. And more importantly, understanding the common name that you use on the label versus the Unicode's name that is used in the database. So matching those two together is very crucial and important to understand how to enter it correctly into the system. This is a lot, right? This is kind of like, I thought this was supposed to be a simple and easy, and it can be, right? It can be. This is all new for a lot of us, especially those who don't, dabble in the drug space or medical device or food space. It is a lot to get done, especially if this is the never have I ever done this before. So those with thousands of cosmetic products will have thousands of listings to do because this is brand new. So it's important to understand this process, these validation issues, these errors, these stop gaps that prevent you from moving forward with properly listing your products on time. And again, I can't stress this enough, the SPL bulk upload, if you have thousands or even hundreds of products, is the best way to manage this type of listings, especially when it comes to a renewal basis, because you'll have all these SPL files, you'll have the root IDs, the set IDs, and these are what are crucial to understand, how these renewal and updates will occur moving forward. And again, we don't know what the renewal or abbreviated renewal process will look like, but having these SPL files make it a lot easier to manage and to understand when renewal comes in to update and to delist. Next up is we're going to talk about adverse event requirements for cosmetics. We have been stressing since last year because adverse event requirements are in effect. You should be record keeping. You should be reporting any serious adverse events. This has been existing in the drug, medical device, and dietary supplement industries for FDA, and now moving to cosmetics. So we like to think that we have a system in place because, we have a consumer complaint department, but that is not the case here, right? Most companies do not have an adverse event system in place that only deal with cosmetics. Adverse event reports require specific information in regard to health-related events. So very, very different from these consumer complaint departments that are streamlined around quality issues, or I didn't like my shade, or my pump is not working, right? Those align with the customer service and quality parts of a cosmetic business, where adverse events are really related to the health and events that occur on with the use of a cosmetic product to a person who's using it. So these reports are very crucial to collect the right information, to have the right information, and even the mandatory information required by FDA when submitting those reports. Records themselves of adverse events must be maintained for 6 years, 3 years for small businesses, and these are able to be accessed during an inspection with FDA. So very, very important to understand how those record access and the ability for FDA to come in to access those records is crucial to keeping a proper adverse event management system. Now you're probably all saying, I've never had an adverse event happen. I'm good. I'm good. I don't need to worry. Well, I wish that was the case. FDA has updated the serious adverse event definition to include specific provisions that occur with health-related events in the cosmetic sector. So those initial, death or life-threatening experience, infection, inpatient hospitalization, persistent or significant disability, and congenital anomaly or birth defect were those established serious adverse event definitions and requirements. The below bolded bullet points are the added provisions that happen more often in the cosmetic sector. So serious persistent rashes or infections, second or third degree burns, significant hair loss, or persistent or significant alteration of appearance. These are much more customary in the cosmetic sector, and we see that under conditions of use happen more often than not. And I will say in the recent years, happening way more often because of the influencing on social media, on TikTok, and using multiple products at the same time. I could say 15 years ago, I think I used maybe 3 products, and today I probably alone have about 20 on. So the increase of the amount of products that you use has also increased the ability of adverse events to happen, and more increased the ability for serious adverse events to happen, because multiple brands are not testing with multiple other brands about interactions that occur with the use of those products. So understanding the change in the industry and in the influencing and ingredients in general with their use, and forgive me for saying misuse that could happen, the potential for these events to occur is much more often. So, for the serious adverse events, FDA has established that it needs to be reported within 15 business days when a consumer reports to a responsible person that a product has caused a serious adverse event. With that, you need a copy of the label within the retail packaging, and then for up to a year, you still need to submit all new and material medical information that you receive on that adverse event and that product. And you still need to follow that 15 business days. So a serious adverse event occurs, you have 15 business days to report. And then as you continuously follow up with the investigation, with the review, with the report, new medical information, that all still has to be reported within 15 business days to FDA. So it is a lot to manage. It is a lot to understand this regulation and those requirements. But it's an important piece, right, of keeping a company protected as well. I can't stress this enough. The record keeping action of the adverse event is going to be so beneficial to a company, and it not only helps make sure that FDA is aware of any adverse events and serious adverse events occurring, but a proper record keeping system will help keep all of this necessary information organized. As a company, you'll be able to detect issues, trends, and patterns of a product to protect against a public health concern, right? The best person to find out something is wrong with a product is the company making the product. So you want to have all this information available to you. You're also able to expedite serious adverse events with a proper intake and record keeping system. You're able to normalize incident rates and predictable events with the use of a specific product. Best example I have is, we had a lotion a couple years ago, and when on first use, people would turn slightly red for 3 days of use, right? And then it would slowly go away. We understood this because of the complaints that were coming in. We were able to see the incident rates, and we were able to provide warning on the label to say, of first use, if this is the first time you're using, expect a little redness at first, but will dissipate within a week. So you're able to determine those acceptable ranges and actionable variations that occur with the use of a product. And then again, the record keeping is the best post-market surveillance tool you can have for enhancing your consumer safety. What better way? We all do our safety testing, our RIPTs, and we have 50 people that say good to go, no irritation. What better way than to release it to the market, to thousands of people, and understand the reactions that occur? I think this record keeping is just going to put companies in such a better position and understanding their products and their use in the market a lot better. We're going to talk about the 4 components of adverse events, especially in terms of MOCRA and how you can prepare as a company. First, receiving. So when you're receiving an adverse event, contact information is to be provided on the label for consumers to submit an adverse event report. This could be a domestic address, a domestic telephone number, or an electronic contact information. And this could be a website. So this is the first time FDA has allowed electronic contact for adverse events. So this is brand new. We're all learning on this, but this is really in part to the ability of a company to have a URL provided so that a consumer can quickly go to a website and enter the information for a adverse event, right? And we all know small packaging for cosmetics and everything that's required on primary. So adverse event contact information is supposed to be on both the primary and secondary packaging. So very important to understand that this URL will really help control that as well. What you're seeing ahead of you is our current adverse event management system. We provide you with the URL. The URL takes the consumer to a branded website with your company logo, and we ask all the important information so that you do not need to keep going back and digging and investigating and asking follow-up questions. The adverse event report requires up to more than 30 fields of information, and we collect that at the forefront so that you can understand the adverse event if it needs to be reported, and you have all the proper record keeping and time stamping. It's able to do this digitally in a form, a mobile app even, so that you can keep proper records of all the adverse events that are coming in. Review and investigation. So very important that after an adverse event comes in, that you are able to evaluate the adverse event, that you're able to review the information that came in. So those 30 plus fields are super important to understanding, was this consumer error? Was this a user error? Did they use expired product? Did they not, use it as it was intended? Did they have a pre-existing medical condition? These are all parts of the investigation, steps to have in place to ask all the right questions so that you can determine if the product was at fault, the consumer was at fault, if there's a public health concern, or if it was a one-time use of a one-time consumer product. So these are very, very important steps in understanding, one, the records that have to be kept for an adverse event or serious adverse event, and then again, if it needs to be reported to FDA. It's important to understand that these, investigations take place by medical doctors, dermatologists, in determining significant or persistent rashes or infections, right? What is significant hair loss? All those things are important during the investigation and help you determine exactly what needs to be done moving forward. Just a quick snapshot on how we handle our adverse event management. So our software service will show the consumer name, consumer email. These are all made up demos and not real people, not real brands. But you can see here, this is a great way to manage your adverse events that come in. You can have your product listing number, the date of the report, the event type. So if it's serious, if it's not, ways to upload documents so that you can have all the labels ready to go, the safety substantiations, the emails back and forth with the consumer, any medical data as well. All of these are very, very important to have and have organized in order to do so. Recording, again, you need to maintain this confidential personal medical records for 6 years, and these records can be accessed by FDA. Having a digital document management system is the most effective way to keep records of communication, especially in this day of age where everything is email and everything is uploading. So it's important these communications with reporters or records of the responsible person's assessment of the report, hospital doctor, lab data, all of that needs to be stored properly, right? And I hear a lot of people say, well, I have an Excel and that's how I'm tracking. And unfortunately, that is not the best route to do that. There's a lot of flaw in having Excel just telling you these are the adverse events that came in without properly having spaces to keep the records, the documents. They have to be controlled due to the sensitivity of them being medical or hospital or doctor's notices. They have to be in a secured area because this is information that is private, that is personal, and is confidential. Lastly, the reporting, very important to understand that the report for serious adverse events has to be submitted within that 15 business days and with the minimum requirements of a patient, reporter, suspect product, and a serious adverse event that occurred. Currently, FDA is accepting all serious adverse events through the MedWatch form 3500A. So this is found on the FDA website. And they're also accepting all additional documents through an email address. But again, these images and labels and all these documents that have to be submitted, you need to have them in one organized area, especially if you have multiple adverse events coming in due to this updated health-related adverse event. We're going to see more, and we're going to see more people aware of MOCRA and aware of the new contact on the label information. So before, a lot of, this was filtered through consumer complaints, through social media, and it never had to be recorded. So think of all those things that you experienced as a brand that probably were a health-related incident that were not handled as a health-related incident will now need to do so moving forward. So very important if you don't have this already established to make sure that you have a system in place. Registrar is here to help. We have been holding webinars, educational webinars, in-person webinars, answering questions wherever we can, and here to support. And we offer the complete FDA compliance solution for cosmetics, product listings, adverse event management, online training, label review, US agent, facility registration. We have Cosmetry product formulation software, and even our new consulting services. So we are here to help. I can't stress that enough. I've been in industry for almost 20 years. This industry is in my heart, in my soul. Any of you that have met me in person know that I just want everyone to be compliant and have a really good understanding of FDA compliance and what is going on in industry, because we are a family, we are a team, we all have to work together, and there's so many moving parts. So if you don't have the staff, if you don't have the resources, this is where you can reach out to us and we can help. Product listings is probably the most daunting I have seen, mostly because a lot of people are not familiar with SPL bulk uploads, not familiar with FDA portals. And we have been helping thousands of companies get listed, and thousands of listings get through. So we are the experts. I feel confident in saying that because I myself have just seen the phenomenal work our team has done. We do fast turnarounds to meet your deadlines, easy templates. We have expert guidance. If you, whatever problem you think is too big, we are here to help and here to answer. We also have a software that is proprietary to us that automatically creates these SPL formats that get bulk uploads done very, very fast. And we are here to help not just with these product listings for July 1st, but for everything after: new formulations, new products, new resets, holiday kits, delisting, ongoing management to support you. So we will be here through all seasons, to help make sure that you are properly listed, on time, and compliant. And again, our adverse events, and I can't stress this enough, very easy to use platform. We protect the consumer's personal medical data with our ISO compliance certification. It is real-time collection, so no call centers, no emails. I mean, this is real time. You understand when an adverse event comes in, and you can act immediately. It's so important to understand this new regulation and what it means to your team and what it means to making sure a system's in place. And again, that easy to use records management system, that's going to come into huge play, as I mentioned, not just for FDA compliance, but for an overall view of your company's related post-market surveillance and incident rates. We are now also just launching our online training to support compliance for quality assurance teams. Working in factories my whole life, I can tell you GMP is not easy. Quality assurance and control and GLP is very confusing and hard to implement. If you have not already done so, we have a ton of new courses that focus on quality management. And as I mentioned, GMPs are coming up super fast. So 6 months, we'll be seeing some proposed rulemaking, and I can't stress enough, get started now to really understand the GMP, backbone, understanding GLP, and any type of quality insurance that you would need to have in place or build out now. For joining our webinar today, we would love to give you 15% off. The code is right there. You can use it as checkout. And if you have any questions about our training, we have tons more coming. Very, very excited about our online training program. And it will definitely be at the forefront of making sure everyone is not only compliant with MOCRA, but all pieces of the cosmetic industry as well. Again, if you have any questions, I probably might regret putting my personal email out there, but that is my personal email. I will be happy to help you with any questions, anything that you might need to know, even if it's just quick, like I think I did this and I'm not sure, reach out. I am happy to answer, happy to help. We also have a MOCRA wizard tool for anyone who does not know exactly what requirements are for them under MOCRA. Just take a quick little MOCRA wizard and it will tell you what regulations apply to you as well. And I would be not, we have many more webinars coming up next month. Mark your calendar. We have Anna Benavente, our label and ingredient director, presenting on cosmetic labeling, which we know there are thousands of questions around. And she's going to be talking not only about the current MOCRA product labeling regulations, but also current regulations. Labeling is confusing, and I will be the first one to tell you what goes on primary, what goes on secondary, and once you print, that is it, right? The printing happens and there's no going back. And I can't stress enough to make sure you have a proper label review before going to print is crucial in industry, because print times at facilities now are astronomical, I heard, and nobody wants to waste money on printing or labeling or over labeling. So please join Anna on July 11th for this wonderful webinar. And we are going to answer some questions. I hope you guys have a ton. If we don't get to everything, we will do a follow-up, but Let's get to some of these, and I hope you guys learned some new things today. I hope, again, anything that isn't unclear, feel free to reach out. Small business. So, as a small business, average gross annual sales in the U.S. under 1 million. What specific exemptions apply to us under MOCRA? Very good question. So, everyone wants to be exempt. I got it. I would love to be exempt as well. I'd love to tell you you're all exempt, but the small business exemption is specific to facility registration and product listing and keeping adverse event records for 3 years. All other requirements under MOCRA need to be filed for small businesses. Very, very important to understand. And then there are 4 categories that FDA clarified that if you manufacture any of these 4 categories, regardless of your annual income, you will still need to register and list. And these will be products that come in contact with the eye mucous membrane, products that are injected, products meant for internal use, and then products that change or alter the appearance for more than 24 hours. So that small business exemption is very small number of you that will actually fall and qualify into that, but just understand it is just for facility registration and product listings and that 3-year record keeping. But great question, because I think, we hear small business exemption and we stop listening, and we should not stop listening. All the others are going to come into play as well. Another question, if our products are produced in Canada facility, what should we do? So first thing is to make sure that the facility that you manufacture for in Canada is registered, that they have registered with FDA, and that they have determined their U.S. agent. A U.S. agent is needed for every non-U.S. facility, and yes, this includes Canada and Mexico. And this is, important because the U.S. agent needs to be physically present in the United States. It cannot be a message or call center. It can't be a PO box. It has to be a physical person. As Registrar does U.S. agent services, we act as the communication agent with FDA. So if there's issues with any of your products, if there's inspections that are coming up, if there's any suspensions, issues, public health concerns, this communication is a direct link for someone present in the U.S. for FDA to communicate with. And this is due to time zones and all of that nature. But that would be the first thing to do, is to talk to your facility in Canada, make sure they're registered, have their FEI number, and then also have their U.S. agent. And then again, take your steps asking all of the questions you need to complete your product listing. So you have your FEI number from them. You also need to know what contact information they put on for your brand, what responsible person they put down, and your product categories. If you just have them screenshot it from their registration and give it to you and provide it to you, so there is no miscommunication about the information they entered about your company, because that will hold you up on your end doing your product listing. A couple questions about this recording. The recording is going to be available after. We'll be sending you a follow-up email again, so you can listen to this again and go through the slides, and so just be aware that it will be available for everyone. So a lot of questions I see here about how strict will FDA be and what is the new process after July 1st. So we do not know what will happen on July 1st, whether or not FDA is going to come out of the gates and start, enforcing, if they will start evaluating. One thing I did hear is the ability for industry to understand how important this is, and that FDA granted the 6-month extension to make sure industry was compliant. So we don't know the process. We don't know how FDA will approach this. The only thing I can say to you is that it's important to be compliant from a brand standpoint, right? Nobody wants warning letters. Nobody wants to be non-compliant with their retailers. Nobody wants to have any exposure in a bad way of not being compliant. And that is, the best advice I can give is don't don't worry so much of what could happen to me. What will I face if I'm not compliant? I change the mindset of I want to be compliant, because as a brand, it's important to do so. And again, I hope everyone sees all of the warning letters that get issued, not only on FDA's website, but like in beauty publications. Every time a warning letter goes out, especially if it's a big brand or a name, I must get 6 or 7 emails about the warning letter, and it's kind of turned into its own publication and kind of public lynching of what happened to the brand. So that's where I feel is more of a concern. Not what's going to happen if I'm not compliant, but definitely how can I stay compliant so that as a brand we're doing the right thing. So that's my stance on that. And again, maybe we'll know a little bit more about FDA's ability to enforce after the July 1st date. Some questions about the brand responsible for product listings. So and contract manufacturers. So this comes up often because we, as a brand or RP that uses a contract manufacturer, those contract manufacturers handle everything, right? They handle the manufacturing, the filling, the paperwork, the documentation. And then here comes big MOCRA FDA product listings, and they're turning around and saying it's your job. And by law, it is your job as a responsible person to do it. I also have seen a lot of contract manufacturers say we produce thousands and thousands of products. For us to maintain this would just be impossible. Because it's a whole nother layer of a department that they would need to build out as a manufacturer. So I have seen a lot of manufacturers push this back on the RPs because it is their responsibility under MOCRA, and because they cannot take this on of renewing, delisting, updating any of that information, as well as the other tasks that you have agreed upon in your quality agreements with your contract manufacturers. So not to say that some contract manufacturers aren't taking this on, they could very well be. But as an RP, I would definitely make sure you have the conversations with your contract manufacturer and see where their stance is, and then start collecting all that information. It's important as an RP, you are the responsible person to do that product listing. Let's see if we have a couple more on adverse events. So adverse event reporting. As a small business, what are the requirements for setting up an adverse event reporting system for our cosmetic products? How should we document and report serious adverse events to FDA? So a lot of what I talked about was establishing this intake system, management system for your adverse event records. And when I say records, this is all communication that you have with the reporter, the serious adverse event that occurred, all the information that you've collected. So what was the product? How was it used? When was it used? Do you have any pictures of the reaction, medical data? Even if you have email correspondence back and forth, assessment from a doctor, like these are all the records that you should be considering on how to set up. Many of the brands I've already spoken to, as I mentioned, said that we have an Excel and we're just tracking as they come in, and that can be very difficult to continue to manage. This requires multi-layer of taking in records, taking in reports, making sure there's follow-up in a proper, timely manner, making sure that you have the right information from the consumer, that it's reported, and this cannot be captured in an Excel. Trust me, I love Excel. In my labs, I use Excel. In every part of my life, I use Excel. But this is a lot more complicated. It requires a lot of information that is delicate, confidential, and personal. So it should not be handled by someone who is in the company not trained to handle so. And I think that is the most important thing to understand about the management system you have. The reporting currently, FDA has advised through the MedWatch 3500A form, and that is available on FDA website. You can see that form, and that is how you are to report the serious adverse event to FDA. That happens within 15 business days of receiving the adverse event report, and then continue to send in those reports to FDA as you gain new information as well. FDA has said that they plan on having in their own adverse event reporting system for cosmetics, but that is not of yet. So this is currently the way to do so for FDA. And again, all adverse events and serious adverse event records have to be maintained. So having a system that keeps your adverse events and has your serious adverse events is also very key and important to understanding the records part and the access that is available. This is, adverse events, I think, is the biggest struggle I've been seeing. As industry, we've done our safety testing, we've done our RIPT, our micros, our compatibilities, our oculars. We're ahead of the safety part. We're ahead of, understanding labeling to an extent. The adverse events, I think, adds a whole new complexity to give that detailed information that's so much needed when it comes to a health related event. And I think everyone should understand that that's exactly what FDA is trying to do, is to understand the health related events so that they can monitor them correctly. And if there is a huge public health concern, that they're able to do so and act on it properly. Again, it's very much to protect yourself as a brand and then also to protect the consumers. We are running over. I wish I could stay here all day with everyone. Many of you that probably know me know that I love talking about MOCRA. I have all of your questions. They are very important to us. But again, please reach out. If you have any personal questions or you just need help in general with registration, with listings, adverse event labeling, we are really here to help. And I think it's important to understand as an industry, you are not here alone. There are many supporting factors and people and resources. So I would just love to hear from all of you. So thank you once again for joining us. You will be seeing us a lot more. As fragrance allergens come out, the labeling, GMPs, we are just here for it all. And thank you once again.